Hello everyone, I'm Pizzelinski and welcome to the very first video on my channel. I've always loved creating UI animations, so in this video I decided to break down animation After Effects, something similar to what Apple Intelligence do, a mix of distortion, blur and gradient. So let's take a look what I came up with.
To start off, I designed a simple UI screen in Figma that shows basic weekly performance stats. I kept it minimal but still made sure that the key info stands out clearly. Since the animation ends pretty quickly, I also added a button sheet UI to show what happens next, like extra details or actions a user can take. While working on all this, I set up the parts of the UI separately, so it's easier to manage later. In the end, I export everything as raster images. It's just faster and easier than using AEUX plugin for this case.
First, for the primary effect, I create a new composition and import the prepared assets and put them into the project. Then I drag the bar chart and screen images onto the timeline panel. Next, I create a new solid layer named Wave and apply the circle effect to it, which will serve as the core of the animation. I position this effect over the AI summary button and set keyframes to animate the radius. After that, I switch the edge setting to thickness and tweak the feather settings to create a smoother look. To apply this effect properly, I go back to the bar chart asset, which is the target for the effect, and apply the displacement map. I make sure to select the wave layer as the source and enable effects and masks. Then I animate the horizontal and vertical displacement values, keeping them in sync with the timing of the main animation. I duplicate the wave layer to add some color, then hide the original. On the duplicate, I apply the gradient ramp effect. I make sure to set a track matte on the bar chart layer so the gradients confine to that section, adjust the colors and position the gradient accordingly. I also switch the blending mode of the layer to add to make the colors more vibrant. To enhance the effect further, I fine-tune the thickness and feather values of the wave layer and animate the opacity to make the appearance of the effect smoother. For additional polish, I create an adjustment layer and apply a Gaussian blur. I set the blur intensity, then add mask and animate it in sync with the radius animation used on the wave layer. Again, I set a track matte on the bar chart to keep the blur within bounds. Finally, I add an opacity animation to fade out the effect. Now I move on to the secondary animation. I create a new composition, add a background, and then place 3 ellipse layers in different positions. I assign each one a different color and opacity and apply a wiggle expression to their position properties for dynamic motion. After that, I pre-compose these 3 layers to make them easier to manage, and inside that composition I apply a Gaussian blur to each ellipse. Then I return to the main comp and add a pre-made glow asset. Though this could also be created directly in After Effects, and place a new shape layer that will act as a mask to round off the edges of the animated background. Next, I go back to the AI animation composition, copy the wave layer and paste it into the new composition. I simply animate its opacity at the beginning to create a soft entrance. After that, I add the actual content. I copy in the relevant text elements and animate them. For the summary, I use a basic opacity animation, while for the description, I use a typewriter effect animation, where the text appears line by line. To smooth it out, I set the smoothness parameter to maximal. In this next to last stage, I bring in the remaining asset and add some opacity animation from 0 to 100 for wave. Then I drag in the bottom sheet composition and animate it sliding in from the bottom, applying smooth easing for a natural feel. I also update the track matte on the wave layer within the bottom sheet to ensure the animation is constrained by the correct mask. Then I pre-compose all these layers into the main AI animation comp, add a frame asset and set its track matte to round off the edges of the entire composition. Finally, in the last stage, I create a new composition, add a bezel, and include the main animation I created. I animate the whole thing using scale and position to give it a cinematic touch. Well, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please share any comments if you want, and see you in next videos. Cheers.